So as we all know, Contender Series is going to be back for another season. I think last year was probably their most successful season. I believe that a lot of people were very interested in it and very excited to get Contender Series again for the big 2025. And that's coming out. It's coming in August, which isn't that far away, only about 3 or 4 months now. And of course, given the time frame being what we are at now, April, May, fighters are starting to get announced for who's going to be on the show. Of course, there are so many different sources for this. I'm seeing a lot of different sources from management posting. I'm seeing the MMA Matchmaker on Twitter posting. And I'm sure there's other people that I will forget as well. But this list has been all compiled by our savior, Ayla Mayonnaise, on a Tapology forum. And Ayla Mayonnaise has pretty much gone through with either his own sources or taken other people's announcements and just compiled them all on a big list for us. He's made our lives so much easier and made my life so much easier making this video as well. So shout out to him, a La Mayonnaise on Tapology. We're going to start off with the lower weight classes that we are aware of. I do want to say as well, I've made a critical mistake. I'm not using an ad blocker for this video. My ad blocker for Google Chrome just stopped working. So I normally use Brave, but we're just raw dogging it right now, I'll be honest. And some of the ads that I get popping up on Tapology these days, there's some pretty crazy stuff, so we might get a few jump steers along the road, but you know what, it's just going to make for a more exciting video. Carol Forro has actually been announced to be, I believe, fighting at women's strawweight against Chanel Dyer, but this could be a fight at women's flyweight. I could be wrong if the matchup's not happening, but both Forro and Dyer are very talented strikers. Forro actually has a lot of first round finishes over somewhat decent competition over at Jungle Fight, which is a Brazilian promotion, which he is now the champion of. And then, of course, Chanel Dyer is a former PFL prospect, which the PFL, for some reason, released her, even though she had a very successful run in the European PFL sort of tournament there with 2 wins, and Valentina Skitizzi ended up fighting at one point against Dakota Chiva. So a win over her, despite being a 3-2 record, is a pretty good win. So it'll be interesting to see how the former PFL fighter can go in the Contender Series. There's more than one as well. Frank Silva, he's the first and I believe only male flyweight to be announced. I do understand we're going to be getting less men's flyweights on the Contender Series this year because the men's flyweights are, of course, on the Ultimate Fighter, which is going to be a fantastic season. If you're not interested in it, I do recommend it. He's 20 years old, one of the better mullets outside of New Zealand I think I've ever seen, to be honest. Like, this is like probably top 3 mullets outside of New Zealand I've ever seen, I'll be honest. And he's a big time finisher early on. I will admit I'm not familiar with these promotions that he has fought for whatsoever, but Jan Faraz is a veteran and he knocked him out in 76 seconds, so he could be a good guy to look out for. Now we move up to men's bantamweight, Juan Diaz from Peru. As we all know, there's quite a few talented guys from Peru right now in the UFC. I think most notably Daniel Marcos, but we do have a couple of other guys in there too, and there are also a couple of other guys on the regional scene from Peru, just like Juan Diaz, with these crazy records that haven't been picked up by a big promotion yet. And Diaz recently has been fighting for the Mexican promotion Lux Fight League to become the champion for them. He's been getting some finishes every now and then, but for the most part is grappling his way to decision victories. Should be interesting to see how he goes against Kaushik Sakumar. India, stand up. The pride of Chennai is here. Now, I do want to say this. He's not confirmed to be on Dana White's Contender Series. He was actually added to the UFC Fight Pass roster, which is the UFC's database of every single UFC fighter. And then even, like, I think Fedor Emelianenko's on there as well. So it's not like the super most reliable source of information, but it has been confirmed that he's not going to be fighting in the Road to UFC tournament, so we can now assume that he is going to be fighting on Contender Series. He is a 5'10" bantamweight, which is pretty tall, and he's a pretty long sort of guy. He fights for Cage Fury FC in the US, of course, and he has got a couple of early finishes in his last 2 fights. Let's see how he goes in the Contender Series. Luke Riley, again, this is a rumor, but Ayla Mayonnaise mentioned him, so I wanted to mention him here. Now, the thing about Luke Riley is the UFC could just sign him straight up. That would be a move that would work. But you could also make the argument that if they put him on the Contender Series in week number 1 of this year and he won in the main event of the show or whatever, you would be able to build his name more, because Luke Riley is a very promotable guy. He's a very outspoken guy. His fights are super fun, man. Like, He does take a lot of damage. That's my biggest concern about his fight, but you know, Scousers, they don't get knocked out. And I'll be honest, Luke Riley, he does take quite a bit of damage. I think he's got the Cage Warriors Fight of the Year against Alexander Luft, which was just a banger. He did get knocked down a bunch in this fight, but since then he's looked pretty good. Was meant to fight Vallejos in the Contender Series, of course. Now they don't like each other. Could be cool. Tyrell Abasov was looking pretty good against them, but Riley showed really good cardio in that matchup to out-wrestle. Not to out-wrestle Abasov, he was getting out-wrestled, but Abasov gassed out trying to out-wrestle him, I should say. And then he just finished off the gassed up Abasov, so he's been able to prove himself now against strikers and wrestlers. Riley is the real deal. It'll be interesting to see how he goes on the Contender Series, if not just straight to the UFC. Radley De Silva has been on a run recently, a big time win streak for BFL. And these BFL cards, I'll be honest, BFL 80 and BFL 81, pretty awesome cards. And then BFL 82, I think they had like 4 or 5 title fights on the same card. So shout out to BFL. They are Battlefield Fight League. There is another BFL that goes by a different name, so I don't want to get that one wrong. But yeah, become the champion, defended that belt 3 times in the regional scene against good opponents, especially even against Moctezuma, who's a pretty good veteran. And then after that, beat an undefeated guy, and then another veteran as well. He's a cool fighter. Actually got a highlight in against Drake Randall, which was pretty sick. You might have seen it on Twitter if you're active on MMA Twitter. Ramiro Jimenez is a 10-0 Mexican prospect at featherweight. He's a guy to look out for. Lots of early finishes, fights for Combate, which is, of course, he follows me on Twitter. I'm so sorry. I've forgotten his name. Anyway, one of the founders of the UFC. This is his promotion now. Yeah, anyway, he fights for Combate. Combate is a pretty sick promotion. They did a collaboration with, I believe it was Dune, a few months ago, and that was pretty sick. Probably one of the cooler arena setups I've ever seen. But let's get back to talking about Ramiro Jimenez, 10-0 prospect, no-brainer. George Mangos, another no-brainer. This guy's 21 years old. A little bit of bias from me, of course. You know, I'm from New Zealand, but Mangos lives somewhat close to me in Australia, I guess. You know, you can nearly throw a stone over there from here, but yeah, he beat Justin Van Heerden. I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I believe this was a short notice win for him. And he beat him with a flying triangle at the end of round 3. Looked really good with his grappling overall in that fight. And then just since then, it's just been up and up and up and up. This guy is really a very talented guy, undefeated as an amateur, undefeated as a pro. I'll be honest, I didn't think that he was going to beat Van Heerden, but he did. And then since then, he's just looked so good. So I do think that Mangos is a guy to look out for. Tommy Kawazi, an 8-0 guy at featherweight from the US. His nickname is Little T. Obviously has an undefeated professional record. I will be honest, not too familiar with him. Just looking at on the paper, looks like a guy that's just absolutely been smoking everyone he's been fighting. So be cool to see how he goes. I do know a boxing friend as well, at bantamweight, who fought against Soho City. Taveras, Ramon Taveras, had a record like this, and he turned out to be pretty good. So I'll be honest, I need to do a little bit of my own research on him. Delano, I'm familiar with though, just got a massive win in the LFA Contender Series Eliminators, I guess you would call them. And what I mean by that is, recently the LFA has been hosting events where the fights are very obviously set up for where the winner is going to be on the Contender Series or on the UFC. Delano just beat Abu Muslim Alikhanov, who I believe is from Russia. I was going to say Kazakhstan, so I was going to be wrong. Knocked him out in the first round, and then before that, of course, lost to Gabriel Santos in that tournament, which Gabriel Santos won, and then fought Lerone Murphy on short notice afterwards. But beside the point, the one loss he's got is to Santos, when Santos was looking really good. I would argue Santos in the LFA looked better than he did in the UFC, but there could be a level of competition thing, of course. But yeah, this guy just, like, look at his record, man. This guy's beaten some really good guys, and he just is a good fighter. 28 years old, 15-3 record. Manuel Exposito, on a bit of a run. He did go on a 2-fight losing streak at the start of his career, or should I say, not at the start of his career, but a few fights ago. He was on a win streak. Lazaro Dayron has turned out to be a pretty good fighter himself. He's 8-0. And then, of course, Tommy Garcia. Not too familiar with him, I will be honest. But since then, he's beaten 3 guys in a row. A very aggressive guy from Argentina. You know, a lot of these guys from Argentina fight with a similar style. Kind of think more of a very much grappling heavy, but less boxing heavy Kevin Vallejos is Manuel Exposito. Marcio Babosa. Barbosa's a lot of fun. This guy's got no cardio though. I'll be honest. He's 16-2, and what is it? 13 wins by KO in the first round, 2 wins by sub in the first round. He'll put a pace on you, man, and then he will just gas out if he doesn't get it. I mean, that's how fun his fights are. I'll be honest. If he doesn't get that first round finish, he is in trouble, but he is a very tough guy to deal with, and he did get, of course, a couple of big wins in his last couple of fights. Manuel Sosa, yes, that Manuel Sosa, the Bellator Manuel Sosa, if you are unfamiliar with him, very good fighter. This guy has had a pretty good run on the regional scene. Come into the PFL, won on the PFL's Contender Series, the Challenger Series. Knocked out a guy on Bellator, Tim Wild, who was a bit old, I'll be honest, but still 17-4 record, pretty good. And then he lost to one of Bellator's best guys, Archie Colgan, who's a fantastic boxer with wrestling to back it up too, by decision. And it was a somewhat competitive fight, so Sosa's a good fighter. This guy could go pretty far. Don't really know why the PFL just dropped him, but I guess it's just because they maintain such a small roster. But yeah, Sosa's a talent. I think that you could see him go pretty far. Here we go. The first ad of the video. Huge range of super greens. There's only one type of green that I'm consuming, and I don't think it's that one. Christian Perez, 13-1. This guy should have been on the Contender Series last year, in my opinion, but here he is. He actually hasn't fought since 2023. He's a good fighter though. Maybe, I think actually, I remember this actually. I believe he asked to be released from Combate, but then it was actually rumored that he was going to fight on and just get signed straight up to the UFC, and then he never did. So he's going to be on the Contender Series this year. I don't know if the UFC told him they were going to sign him, and then now he's on the Contender Series. That could be a bit awkward for him, but he's 25, 13-1. He's a good fighter, one of the better guys I think to come out of Combate recently, so it should be pretty good to see how he goes. And Damon Wilson marks and move up to lightweight. So we just went through a lot of featherweights. I don't know if I mentioned when we started at featherweight, but here we are. Damon Wilson. Lots of finishes in the first round. Of course, he's been fighting for Cage Warriors on the American shows for the most part. A couple of losses, but John G. Jesus is a very tricky striker to deal with. He actually gave Luke Riley a somewhat competitive fight, in my opinion. And then Tobias Harilla has a lot of power in that right hand. I mean, he knocked him out with an elbow, but Harilla's powerful, man. And yeah, Damon Wilson. He's a guy, of course, at lightweight now, marking the beginning of that weight class. Jeremy Drago, 7-2. I think he's fine at lightweight. I could be wrong. He's listed as a welterweight on a Tapology site here, but one loss to an undefeated guy. And then since then, he's gone on a run. He's actually taken the O from quite a few guys throughout his career. Once again, I'll be honest, not super familiar with him, but should be interesting to see how he goes. Ty Miller at, I believe, once again, I think we're still at 155, but we could be at 170 now. We're definitely at 170 now with Ty Miller. He's only 5-0. Technically, he has fought 6 times as a pro, and a lot of finishes throughout his career, a lot of early finishes in his career. It should be good to see him. Now we've got the middleweights. Yuri Panro. It is believed that Yuri Panro is actually fighting against Christopher Hewitt, who just got a massive win. But we'll talk about him in a moment. Panro, as you guys may or may not know, fought against Torres Finney. To be fully honest with you guys, he looked really bad against Finney, I thought. Finney looked amazing in this fight. I don't really know why they didn't actually just sign him from this performance in the first place, because Finney was just kind of beating him up. I mean, I know Panro landed some strikes on him, but I mean, Finney out-wrestled Panro kind of more dominantly than he did anyone else on the Contender Series. So, interesting to see him. He's a very aggressive guy, very, very hittable on the feet, though. And Hewitt might be able to find something there, because he just had a banger against Reese Watkins, who you guys may know as Baby Goose, of course, on Twitter. He tweets all the time. Went to war with Hewitt, and Hewitt ended up getting it done. I'm about to cough. I do apologize. Give me one moment. There we go. Super professional. We keep going. Nemia Santana, 7-2-1 at middleweight. We're nearly at the end of the video. 14 minutes. Okay, not too bad. Lots of early finishes for the LFA recently. And then, of course, other promotions too. To be honest, not super familiar with him. Should be interesting to see how he goes. Damien Pinaz, this guy genuinely, um, I mean it's a pretty obvious comparison. He is the Atiba Gautier of this. He's from Suriname, big time power for a middleweight. Lots of early finishes by knockout. His one losses to Italo Gomes by a legal kick, and as you guys know, I think that Italo Gomes does have some talent, so not really a bad loss, even though it is like genuinely a DQ in that fight. This guy is the Tabor Gautier of the season, I'll be honest. A guy that is just big time powerful guy. He is from Nova União as well, and he's a young 23-year-old middleweight. He is a Tabor Gautier, except in 2025. Ryan Gandra, 7-1 middleweight from Brazil now, of course, a former LFA guy. Couple recent LFA wins for him. He's doing well. This is where it gets interesting. Bysinger Susakayev is here. We've got another Russian guy on this one as well. So we've got a couple of guys from Russia now on the Contender Series. You don't really see the Russian guys on the Contender Series, which is interesting considering how, to be honest, a lot of the top 15 of the UFC's rankings is dominated by guys from Russia, but a lot of them are actually signed under contracts to ACA, which is a massive local Russian promotion there. He's 8-0 now. He's fought all over the world, of course, fought in Russia, then recently fought in the US, got a massive win there with second round TKO, and I think that we can probably see him find some success. I mean, in Russia, man, like, dude, I need to watch these fights. A 1 minute KO win, a 40-second KO win over a 6-0 guy. I need to see what's going on over there, I'll be honest. He's 24 years old, he could go pretty far. And we're all familiar with our good friend Will Curry, who, the minus 400 favourite on Jordan Santos, who burned us. And then we turned out that Santos ain't that great in the first place. He just lost to Ozzy Diaz in a fight. Hey, more super greens. More super greens. I thought that Santos won this fight, I'll be honest, but you know, Will Curry looked really bad against Santos, and then he looked okay against Aronov, but it's because Aronov literally gassed out in 2 minutes. I'm not even kidding, but Curry's back. I mean, Curry's a marketable guy. I actually think Curry fights are pretty fun to watch, I will be honest. But he just didn't look that good on the Contender Series last year, so it's just interesting that they're gonna give him such a quick a quick opportunity again, you know what I mean? Felipe Franco, 8-0. I believe he's fine at 205. I believe he's definitely fine at 205. I'm pretty confident. A lot of wins for this guy in the first minutes of the fight. However, there is a glaring issue here. Out of all the guys I've looked over, I do kind of point out when guys have a record that's a bit iffy. This is the worst one, I'll be honest. I mean, you can take your first 2 fights against guys that, you know, don't have much experience, get your confidence up, nothing wrong with that, but when you're 6-0 fighting a guy that's 0-1, and then 7-0 fighting a guy who's debuting, probably pulled out of the crowd, I'm sorry, Felipe, my friend, mate, you've got to fight someone. I mean, at least Nilton Dos Santos had 35 fights under his belt, you know what I mean? But it'll be interesting to see how he looks in those fights, but for Franco, looks like he's in good shape. I'll be honest, I've never seen any of his fights, but he's amassed an 8-0 record right now at 24. It'll be interesting to see how he goes, because Abdul Rakam Yakayev, he's not his opponent to my knowledge. He could be, but I don't think he is. He's a guy. He's a prospect, man, out of Turkey, and he's looked very, very good so far in his professional career. And once again, you know, you take your first few fights against inexperienced guys, but then boom, straight in there with a 7-0 opponent, I should say, and then he's fought a couple of good guys. He's looked amazing in those most recent matchups. Be interesting to see how he goes. Now, of course, he's actually kind of gone into the Aries FC division, and he just took out the 2 best light heavyweights like that. So yeah, he's definitely proven himself on the I mean, Aries isn't a regional promotion out of France per se. They've got a lot of international fighters on their roster. So what we've seen of Yakayev is we've seen he's been able to beat international level competition already at 24. He could go pretty far. Let me know if I've missed anyone. Let me know if there's any heavyweights, because this is a light heavyweight here. I don't know any heavyweights on the show, but that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.